Alright, so in this video we're going to get started with Project 2, which if you've read through the description here, you'll know that you're making a text-based adventure game, as similar to Zork and like we did in class. Feel free to go ahead online and just play some of these games to figure out what they kind of are. You could just Google text-based adventure game, and you'll find hundreds of them up on the internet. But your game needs to be fairly simple. We're going to make a game that takes place in a 3-story dungeon. So there's going to be 3 floors. And as you go through each room in each floor, you're going to collect items and fight monsters. And there's going to be 6, 7 possible commands. A person can either move left or right through the rooms. If there's a staircase, they'll be able to move up or down. If there's an item in the room, they'll be able to grab it. And if there's a monster in the room, they can fight it. And at any time, a person playing the game could type in the word help. And if they type in help, they'll get a description of all the available commands and what they do. So kind of just like a cheat sheet in case someone doesn't know how to play the game. And the important part about this is that if they type in one of these commands, and it's not a valid command, we need to let the user know. And our game needs to be able to handle that correctly. So if they try to move left and there's no room to the left, we need to provide them some sort of information that says that. And the whole idea of the game, and you could read through the long description, but you have a floor. Each floor is made up of 5 rooms. And the room can have one of these several items: a sword, a monster, magic stones, a stairwell going up, a stairwell going down, or nothing. And the idea is that the user can move through this dungeon, and their goal is to collect the magic stones and fight the final boss that's in the final level. The important part is that the monsters in the rooms can only be defeated if the user has a sword. And if they fight a monster, they lose their sword. So they'll have to be able to pick up multiple swords and able to work their way through the entire dungeon. In order to beat the game and beat the final boss that's in the final room, the user is going to need both the sword and the magic stones. So the magic stones are cool because we can hide them somewhere in our dungeon, and the person will be able to have to kind of search around to find them in order to defeat the final boss. All right, so I'm going to skip through this, but again, you can read the full description at your own leisure. But I want to get started making this program here, or making this little game here. So the idea is that our dungeon is going to be made of 3 floors, 5 rooms. And the way we're going to set this up is just a series of lists. So we're going to make a list for each floor. You can see this list only has 3 rooms, but ours will have 5 in it. And if we just make these 3 lists, those will basically be our dungeon, and then we can use those lists to control where our user is in the dungeon. So what we're going to do before we even start this, and I recommend, is that you draw your dungeon out on a piece of paper. First, just to have an idea of how to set up your dungeon, how to set up your list, but 2, to make sure that the game is beatable somehow. So we want to make a dungeon, we want to make a dungeon that's kind of like a maze where they have to explore to get all the items. We want to make sure they can beat it somehow. So that means that if they're going to fight a monster, they need to be able to pick up a sword beforehand. So what I've done here, I've just gone ahead and opened up a spreadsheet, and I've made 1, 2, 3 floors and 5 rooms across. So we're just going to use this to fill in really quickly and make a dungeon. I'm just going to zoom in really quick. All right, perfect. So the way that I'm going to set up my dungeon is actually I'm going to have them start on the top, and I'm going to have them work their way down to the bottom. So I'm just going to have a top floor, middle floor, bottom floor. I'm have the user start off in the top floor. And I'm actually going to have them start off in this leftmost room. It doesn't matter where they start. You can pick anywhere for them to start. I'm going to have them start in the leftmost room. And so I'm just going to call this start. And I'm going to put that there's going to be nothing in here. And remember, a room can either have nothing. It can have a sword. It can have a monster. Or it could have magic stones, or it could have a final boss. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start to draw out this dungeon with monsters and stuff in it, and hide the magic stones somewhere in this dungeon. And I want to show you kind of a cool way to set this up. So you can make a simple game where the person just goes from, you know, the first room to the second, third, fourth, goes down the stairs, goes across, goes down the stairs, goes across. But that would be kind of boring. So one of the things is you can make your game a little more interesting by using the monsters to block off certain sections of the dungeon. So for example, let's say if I put the magic stones right here. But right in front of the magic stones, I put a monster. You can see if that the user started here and they tried to go straight across to the magic stones, they wouldn't be able to do it because there's a monster in the way and they don't have a sword. So one thing that I can do is right here in front of the monster, I could put a staircase going down. And then I could put a sword right here. And then right here I could put a staircase going up. Just call it stairs up. And so that way, if my player starts off right here, you can see they can't go straight across and grab the magic stones. But what they could do is if they start here, and then they go here and they take the stairs down, they could grab this sword, move back over, take the stairs up, and then fight the monster and get the magic stones. So that's one way you can make your game a little more interesting, is by kind of not drawing it out as a straight line, but kind of thinking about how could they work their way through this dungeon to find all the items. And then maybe behind here we put another sword. And then from there we can just kind of draw out the rest of this dungeon. So I'm just going to throw in some extra monsters. Alright, so this looks pretty good. They can definitely beat this dungeon. They can grab the magic stones. There's a couple extra swords in there, some monsters to fight, and the final boss off in the corner. And we have the stairs going up, the stairs going down, so they can navigate through the dungeon just fine. So now we're going to turn this here dungeon into just a series of lists, and that's going to be a great start for our game. So one thing I wanted to point out here is I'm just going to add some extra rows to point out that the way our dungeon is going to work is that, again, these will be our lists. And I'm going to name my list Floor 1, Floor 2, and Floor 3, with Floor 1 being the top floor and Floor 3 being the bottom floor. So they're working their way down the dungeon. So I'll have them start on Floor 1 and work their way down to Floor 3. And then remember, our lists are 0 indexed, so although we have 5 rooms, everything in this column will be indexed 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively. And you can start to think of how I'm going to be able to use this to control where my user is. I can just use the list along with an index to identify where in the dungeon they are. So in that case, I can go ahead to Trinket and turn these floors into lists. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Trinket here, and I'm just going to throw these. There we go. Oh, there we go. Perfect. That way I can look at my list here and write my code. And so I'm going to start off really quick with just some 3 lists. Floor 1, Floor 2, Floor 3. And all I'm going to do is fill in these lists with the items that are in each room. So the first room has nothing. Second room has stairs down. Third room has a monster. And I'm just going to keep filling this out. And so you can see here I have my 3 lists. Floor 1, Floor 2, Floor 3. Each has 5 items. One thing that I just want to point out that's very important about your lists is that I made sure that everything was just typed the same. So if you type stairs down, you want to make sure you spell it and write it the exact same way the second time. That way we can use it for input validation when our user types in a move. We can check to make sure there are a staircase going down. So just naming everything the same across the board is really going to help. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're just going to use two variables to track what floor and what room our user's in. And we're actually going to set them immediately at the start of the game to our user's starting location. And an example of this is put right here in the instruction sheet. Perfect way to do it is just use two variables to track both the room and the floor. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this. I'm going to name these two variables current floor, current room. So current floor, and the current floor, we're actually going to, I want my user to start off on the first floor here. So I'm just going to do current floor is floor 1, and current room, and again I'm going to set this to the starting location. He is in the first room, so that is index 0. And the reason why this works is you could think about it, right? If I wanted to print, let's say, the user's current room, the player is currently in room. If I wanted to say the first room, well, I would type that out. Floor 1, index 0. Right? If I print this out, the player is currently in room nothing. Right? He's in the first room. There's nothing in it. I could also use these variables now to track that. So if I did the player is currently in room, current floor, current room, and I'll get the same exact effect. So it'll tell me where he's in. So then if later I change this variable, to change to a different room, you'll see that this updates accordingly. So the reason why we're using variables to track the location is we can use the variables, we can change the variables, but then our statement can remain the same using current floor, current room, and that way we can write something once and use it no matter what room the player is in. So if you can get this far, the 3 floors, 2 variables to track the user's location, we are in good shape to start our project.